All right. Good morning, everybody. Today's Daf Nun Maseches Yevamos. So start off with Rabbi Gamliel, the Mishnah. Nun. Mishnah.
Oh,
Parak.
the Mishnah.
Yeah, the fifth parak, Rabbi Gamliel.
Okay.
You got it? All right. So Rabbi Gamliel Omer Ein Get Achar Get. So it's very important, right? The to understand. We'll have an upcoming machlekes. Now, the Torah obligates one to go ahead and either build his brother's house, which would be through yibum, right? Which is done through bia, through relations, or if one rejects his brother's house, he can still do chalitza. But once you do chalitza, right, you can no longer, right? She's considered your chalutza, and it's not like she's considered to be someone who you never had any sort of, relation with, and therefore all of her relatives are mutter. She's now considered, she's your chalutza, and therefore there are, ramifications that he would be usher to krobasel. So Rabbi Gamliel Omer Ein Get Achar Get. So he says like this: if one goes ahead and let's say there's two women there, right, and he gives one get to the first to Rachel, and then he gives a get to Leah. So he says Ein Get Achar Get basically from Imanavshach, because the Torah doesn't command you to give a get, right? The way to sever the yibum, the zika, is through chalitza, right? It's not through a get, but the get might work, might not, or might remove part of the zika, right? Like midrabanan. So that which the get works on Rachel. So if it removes the zika, right? So then the second one is available. Leah is available. And if it does nothing with Rachel and also doesn't affect the zika at all by just giving a get, then Leah, right, it also will do nothing to her. So it's like a miman of shach according to Rabbi Gamliel. So Gamliel ain't get achar get. And we said Maimer is basically just giving kesef kedushin, but the Torah just says you don't need kesef kedushin, you do bia, right? But if you do Maimer, so it sort of marries her, it sort of doesn't, right? So therefore, if Maimer does work with the first one, then the second one you give kesef, right? So then, so the zika, she's not considered to be your chalutza, and if it doesn't work, right, with the first one, it won't work with the second one. Right, and there is no bia achar bia. Now, if you do bia with the first one, the second one bia, you do not make her your wife at all, right? There's no relationship. There is just an isser. And so to do chalitza to one, do chalitza to the other one, right? So the chalitza, the first one, completely severs it. Therefore, the chalitza, the second one, is like doing chalitza to a random stranger, and therefore it's ineffective in order to make you usher b'krovasel. The chachamim yesh get achar get. No, there is get achar get. Get sort of removes it, sort of doesn't. It's still hanging there. So therefore, if I give the get, right, so it partially works, and therefore it also partially works on the second one. It doesn't remove anything, and therefore it is considered to be like a woman, right, who fell to yibum and the guy gave a get to. So therefore, and he would violate, right, the shuv lo yivna, right, he would violate the isser of not taking your brother's house. If you don't take it immediately, then, or if you don't take it through yibum, then he can never take it again. V'yesh maimer achar maimer, and so too, if he goes ahead and he marries one of them, the other one could also be considered. It would be a maimer to the second one. Avalo achar beila, avalo achar chalitza. But if there is bi or chalitza, then those completely either separate with chalitza or through yibum, or through beila, there would be yibum. Now, Ketzah. Let's go through the cases where the Gemara, basically we have four possibilities for one to do. And the Gemara is the Mishnah is going to break down 1-to-1 versus 1-to-2 and 2-to-1. Or actually, it doesn't go to the order, it goes right. So if the 1-to-1, in other words, a guy was married to a woman, he died, fell to the one brother. So case awesome maimer biyavim. So if he does maimer to her, he gives her kesef kedushin, which we said sort of does yibum, but it doesn't remove the zika. The nasa la get, and he gives her a get afterwards, right? So basically, that whichever he married her, he just divorced her with, right? So tzricha mina chalitza. You need chalitza afterwards. Now you can't do yibum because we said there's a lav. Once you don't take her through yibum, you can no longer take her. So by giving right? So by giving her the get, now, right, you severed it. Therefore, you have to do the chalitza. Asa mimer of a chalitza. If he does mimer first and then chalitza, so the mimer was kesef kedushin, right? The chalitza does not remove the mimer. Tzricha min a get. You have to go ahead and give a get to remove that mimer, right? If he doesn't want to go right. Now, asa mimer. If he does mimer kedushin ubal and then he does bia, hareza k'mitzvah asa. Right, that's the mitzvah, right? There's mimer, which is she's sort of married to you, and then you do yibum, that's okay. Nas and get the asa mimer. If he gives her a get, and then he does mimer, so basically he sort of divorces her, removes her, and then he gives her kesef kedushin. Now we don't let him do yibum anymore once he gives her a get. So therefore, it's a get. You need get from that mimer of the chalitza, then the chalitza afterwards. Nasan getu bal. If he gives her a get and he's bal, tzricha get. You have to get tzricha get a chalitza. So if he gives her a get, so basically he severs part of the zika. Therefore, he can no longer take her yibum, and then he does bia with her. So that bia, we don't allow you to go ahead and be with her because you already gave her a get. Therefore, it's tzricha get. You have to get a get from that bila, the chalitza. Now do chalitza to sever the zika. Nasan get the chalatz. If he gives a get. And then he does chalitza, right? Ein achar chalitza klum. Now the get sort of removed the zika, but the chalitza did. So therefore, you don't need anything afterwards. Chalatz. Now, if he first does chalitza, and then after he does chalitza, now basically when he does chalitza right away, she's done. And then afterwards, vasa mimer nasan get ubal, and he does any one of those, or obal, he has bia with her first, and then then afterwards he'll give her kesef kedushin or nasan get, or he gives her a get afterwards, the chalatz, or he does chalitza. Ein acher chalitza klum. Right, both these cases, the halach is there is no. If he does chalitza to the first one, whatever comes afterwards doesn't make a difference. And if he does bia with the first one, then he acquires her. Whatever comes afterwards is insignificant. So that was that case. Turn the page. Thank you. Achas yavama, achas liyavam. So over here, we're talking about the case which we just said of when there was one yavama. In other words, there was one lady who was widowed to one yavam. There was only one brother. So achas yavama, yavama achas liyavam echad, or v'achas, or whether it's a case of shtei yavamas liyavam echad, or the guy had two wives and then he died and then left to one brother. Ketzad, how is that case? Now we're talking about cases instead of one man and one woman. There's going to be one man and two women, and he's going to do one to one and one to the other. So let's see. Case asa mimer bezu. If he gives the first one, bezu. If he gives her mimer, so he gives the kedushin to one, mimer bezu, and he gives kedushin to another one. Tzricha shtei gitim chalitza. Now he needs to gittin, right? Because this is not the and then chalitza. Right, because this is not the way to go, and this holds like the Rabbanan, right? This would be like the Rabbanan, right? One chalitza, the chalitza is done because if you do chalitza to one, then it removes everything.
That's crazy.
So, right. So therefore, right. In other words, that there is all of a sudden it's part of a relative, it's not, and therefore the other one also part yes, part no. Therefore, you can no longer do yibum, right? With the and therefore you need shnei gidim and chalitza. Now, mimer bezu v'get lazu. If he does mimer to the first one, v'get lazu and get to the second one. So he gives mimer bezu to Rachel, and then he gets the get lazu. Tzricha get v'chalitza. Once again, the get in the second one was nothing. The mimer has to get back to the first one, and then he does chalitza. Mimer bezu bal edzu. If he has mimer to the first one, and then he does bia to the second one, beis gitin v'chalitza. Right? He needs to both divorce both of them. Right, and div chalitza, because the bia was called a bia was a bia psula, right? Because once there was a mimer done, and now it's called a bia psula because it wasn't done. It was already done with part of the zika was already sort of right. It was taken by the first one, and therefore he can no longer do bia with the second one. Therefore, he needs to do chalitza. Mimer bezu the chalitz lazu. If he does mimer to woman to Rachel, the first one. The chalatz lazu, and then he does chalitza to the second one. Harishon tzricha get. You have to go ahead and do a get to the first one, but you don't need to redo chalitza because the chalitza was done. Get lazu, the get lazu. If he gives the get to each one, tzricha chamena chalitza. All you need to do is a chalitza because you right, and therefore, and obviously you can't go ahead. You're still forbidden to the relatives, but you still have to sever the zika by doing chalitza. get lazu bal zu. If he gives a get to the first one, ubal zu, and then the second one, he is biat tzricha get. He has to divorce her because we said that the get sort of attaches some of it to the zika, and therefore he can't do yibum with the second one, and therefore he has to have a get from that which he tried to do. They had bia, but chalitza, then he has to do requires chalitza.
But wait, this chalitza is to which one? Anyone?
Either one.
Yeah, either one.
Either one.
Right? Because once it's a good chalitza, then it doesn't, right? So the rule as we see, I think that Mishnah. The Mishnah is actually going to sum it up.
Okay,
It's going to be a rule there. Get lazu. If he gives a get to the first one, umaimer bizu the second one get. So therefore, that kedushin can no longer be done after he does the get to the first one, and therefore he needs to give a get on the second one's maimer, the chalitza, and then perform chalitza. Get lazu v'chalitza zu. If he gives a get to one, and then his chalitza to the other one, ein achar chalitza klum. You don't need anything because remember, the get all it did was sort of. Got him into shuvlo yivneh, right? To the other one, and therefore by doing chalitza, that is okay. And the chalatz, if he does, so chalatz, chalatz vasa b'maimer, or he does chalitza, then he does maimer, which is kedushin rabbanan, nasa and get, right? So in that case, or so in this case, he uses chalatz, either of the chalatz, just chalitza and chalitza. Oh, chalatz vasa maimer, nasa or nasa get ubal, right? So those three are worded together, right? So he does chalitza. And then the chalitza the second one, or he does chalitza, and the second one either he does maimer, get, or bal. Oh, bal ubal, or he does bia with both, right? Oh, bal vasa b'maimer, or he does bia, and then either the second one he does vasa maimer, nasa get the chalatz, ein acher chalitza klum, right? If you do chalitza first, right, then anything that you do to the second one is not relevant, is done, right? And but the zika has already been removed. And so too, if you do bia with the first one, right? So anything that comes afterwards is already after the mitzvah of yibum is done, and then you take it from over there. Now, all these cases, bein yavam echad, as we just explained, shtei yavamas, right? This applies to with one yavam and two women. Bein shnei yavamim liyavamim achas, or if there's two brothers, right? The first one dies, and he has two remaining brothers, right? Right, two with one woman, and each one does something. So chalotz v'yasa maimer, right? So in that case, so we said earlier, chalotz v'yasa maimer nasa get bal. Oh, bal v'yasa maimer nasa get chalotz. All these cases. Ein achar chalitza klum. There is nothing comes after chalitza. Bein b'tchila, bein b'yamtza b'v'sof. Now, the chalitza comes anywhere. Obviously, if the chalitza comes after bia, right, then at the bia, then that already was kaina and removed, took the zika, right? But if there is some sort of suffix, there's a suffix that was placed either by the get or by the mimer. So we say the chalitza, if it comes at any point, that severs it, right? That is the chalitza. Right, that is the chalitza. So, we say, listen to the place, ba'abila. And when it comes to bia, if he does bia, bizman shi b'tchilo ein achara klum. If it's in the beginning, if he does it to the first woman or to the first wife, right, or if he's the first one to do it, that is kaina that completely acquires her. The amsa uvasoif yesh achara klum. However, if it comes in the middle, no, it's basically a bila psula. The other one does, let's say, gittin first, and then he does the bia. So that yesh achar klum, that didn't sever the zika. Chalitza has to be done, right? So in other words, the bia can only come if we know it's 100% acquiring her. But if there's some reason to suspect that perhaps she is now either acquired to somebody else, right? So then, or somebody else is acquired, because there was multiple wives, then that yibum, that bia would not work to sever any of the zika, and only the chalitza would be that which is effective. Achas bila, achas chalitza, whether it's the bia or the chalitza, bein betchila, bein be'amtza b'misof, ein achra klum. Once you do that, even if there's already some sort of suffix in there, you don't need any sort of chalitza afterwards. So l'chara, this is maybe perhaps a little similar to that which we learned by we have to see in terms of what shita. I'm sure the Gemara will ask in terms of Rabbi Nechemia who shita is go, whether by Rabbi Gamliel or not. But he seems to say that even if there's some sort of suffix that was done, let's say by mimer or mimer, let's say to the first wife, right, or get, and the second, right, and the second, and the another, let's say, and then he does to the second wife bia, right. So therefore, that would remove whatever zika is, and then they have to go back. If it was mimer, they have to give another get to remove that. But there's nothing needs to be done for the zika. Fine.
So is that generally you cannot have mimer and Zika exist at the same time?
Well, Zika is like the bond that links the woman to the surviving brother, right? That's the bond. You have to sever that bond, right? That's Zika. So normally the way to remove it is either through Yibum or Chalitza. But if you do mimer is only Kesef Kedushin. It's not Yibum, right? That's not the mitzvah. So all of a sudden it's like, wait, are you acquiring her or not? And therefore it creates, right? That
Two issues.
Mimer is like dibs, right? Yeah.
right, a little bit, right?
But he didn't do it again.
When you do Be'ila,
Yeah.
do you have to have a special kavana for Yibum or just the Maisa
The
Be'ila?
Maisa itself does. Nowadays, machlokes, what they do nowadays, right? I would say the Ashkenaz hold, like the Gemara says, right. But Sephardim don't hold that.
I know that, but I'm saying in the case of the Mishnah,
Yeah, you don't know.
you don't need a kavana. Once
No
you do
kavana.
Be'ila,
No, come on, right? Doesn't have to be the shape.
All right,
Fine.
stop. Mimer says, okay, I'm gonna pull dick, but I didn't do it again.
Zok the Gemara.
all
So
right,
Zok the Gemara, the second last skinny line. So ad kan le pli ella beget acher get. So they only argued, right? And we were talking about it was in the case of get acher get, whether the second get is effective to go ahead and make her relatives, right? Forbidden to him. Aval get, but in the case of get echad, right? Biyavama, if he gives a get to one, umaimer echad biyavama mahani. But if you give a get or mimer with one yavama, then it works. Now it's only 1-to-1, right? And you do it, right? So then that woman is now sort of related to you, right? You gave her a get, so she's sort of like your chalusa, right? You gave her mimer, she's sort of like your wife. In other words, her relatives are now forbidden. Everyone would agree there. My timer, what's the reason? So my timer Rabbanan get biyavama mahani. What's the reason why we say, according to the Rabbanan, right, that a get is effective, right, to basically forbid. Mishum de mahani bi'alma, because normally a get works, right? A get works in general. Right? In every case of kedusha, a guy marries a woman, wants to divorce, he gives her a get. So dia martale mahani, because if we're going to say in this case, how many people will say get lohitzia v'chalitza lohitzia, right? A get, right? Removes a woman or divorces a woman, right? And chalitza lohitzia. And if you say the get is ineffective, does nothing here, chalitza nami lo mahani. People think that chalitza also doesn't do anything, right? The asi lemiva lacha chalitza, and then one might think to go ahead and have bia after he does chalitza. So since we want people to know that chalitza is always effective, we're going to say get, which is similar to chalitza, is effective in order to sort of, make that woman his chalitza.
Why is that the case? Why are you worried that people are going
to confuse the two?
With somebody after you did chalitza?
Because if you see that a get that does nothing, right? Let's say there's two women, right?
Okay.
And I go ahead and I give get to one. I give her a divorce document that doesn't get rid of the Zika. And then and we hold it, the get does nothing. And I say, you know what? I'll just do Yibum with the second one. I like her. I'm going to go ahead and marry her. I'll do Yibum with her. Right? So people will see that. Well, I know he gave a get to her, then he married her. So just because, and then another case, people say, well, if he does chalitza to her, I think it's fine because I know somebody else who gave a get, then married the other one. So someone might think, if I do chalitza to one, I can marry the other one. So we don't want people to do bia, right, after he does chalitza to one. So therefore, we'll say, in that case, you know what, if a get works, since it's similar to chalitza, you're done. And what's the reason why the mimer with one would work is effective? Mishum because normally, right, the mimer works with the regular when you marry it. Because if you say it doesn't work, so people will say mimer liknos, ubia liknos. People will say, oh, I know mimer normally acquires and bia acquires. The mimer loy mahani, and if you say the mimer does nothing, so bia nami loy mahani. People might think that just the bia with one doesn't. I had no intentions for her to be my yavama. I just there was bia nami loy mahani. And that person might, do bia with one and say, you know what? Since mimer is nothing, maybe this bia was nothing, and now I, do the bia, the shem yibum. Maybe I can do the mitzvah. That's the bia acher bia. Fine.
Sounds like a party.
My time, Omer Rabbanan, and what's the reason why Rabbanan say bia psula, yesh achra klum, right? If one does bia psula, I know we said bia psula, we defined as, let's say the get was given to, let's say to one, or there was mimer. Right? So bia psula yesh achra klum. So I'm going to say e bia acher get. So it depends which, right? So if it's bia that came after a get. Or I know as he did bia to one after the other one got a get first. So gzeira bia achar haget mishum bia achar chalitza, because people see that person is bia after a get. A get was given to one, and there's bia to the other one. We say that's no problem. So then people might say, you know what, the gzeira, because bia will come after a chalitza. And we know that once the chalitza is done, it's completely severed, and therefore he's no longer allowed to be with the other sister or the other co-wife. Excuse me. Via biachar mimer, and if we're talking about biachar mimer, knows he does mimer to the first one, and then he wants to do bia the second one. We say it does not acquire gzeira biachar mimer mishum biachar bia, because if we allow him, if he does mimer with the first one, he says, you know what, I want to do even with the other one. I only did mimer. I didn't really do even yet, so I'll do even second one. We say that does not work, because since those are similar in terms of acquiring, people might get confused, and people might do bia to one right after they be the other one. Umay timer amra rabbanan. Hi chalitza psula ein achara klum. Now the other way around, we said at the end of the Mishnah, we said that bia psula does not work, but chalitza psula does work. So what's the reason why the Rabbanan say the chalitza psula ein achara klum? Then I was that's okay. So and they say my ligzor. Okay, what would be your gzeira? Let's see. My ligzor chalutza achar haget mishum chalitza achar chalitza. If you say that maybe you want to go ahead and forbid doing chalitza to one after there was a get to the other one, because people might confuse chalitza with chalitza. Kikohani tichot, right? Go ahead and do chalitza all day. We don't care, right? In other words, you already severed the bond, right? We're not worried.
It is a problem. She wants to marry a point. For the second one.
For the second one, right? Also, Krovim, you might think that the chalitza is done, but over here, at least there's no violation of the shulo yivna, right? That you can take her for that. And then ligzer chalitza achar mimer, and if you want to go ahead and make a gzeira of that, let's say he does mimer to one, and the chalitza the other one, the chalitza shouldn't work, right? Lichar mimer. So why should we make a gzeira? Mishum chalitza achar bia, because maybe if he does bia to one, which is similar to mimer, he might do chalitza to the other words. So ato chalitza achar mimer miloy boy get lemamara, right? So even in that case, right? So if he does mimer, does he not require get lemamara? So chalitza achar bia nami boy get libiasa, right? In other words, if he does mimer, then his chalitza, right? So he'll still need a get from the first one, but the chalitza works. So to over here, right? If he does mimer to the other one, he has bia with her, so he also would require a get. So in other words, there's no reason to think that he can just, he's done with the first one and just go to the second one, do chalitza and be done. The party's over. If he already did mimer with the first one, he would need a divorce. So if he needs bia with the first one, he would need a divorce. So therefore, there's no reason to make a gzeira for chalitza psula. All right, we'll stop here, and then I guess we'll get more into the explanation tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem, of the Mishnah. All right, Shech.